How about this for a mind bender? What if an electric power plant was humming away 150,000 years ago? Or what if the story of a crashed alien spacecraft was carved into stone discs, about 12,000 years in the past? We're about to dive into two absolutely incredible discoveries from China that might just flip everything we think we know about ancient technology on its head.
Both of these finds point to technologies that are just completely out of place for their time. Seriously, it's like finding a smartphone in a history book, way before the telephone was even a dream. These aren't just little oddities. They genuinely force us to rethink the entire timeline of human invention.
So it all boils down to this one huge question, right? Is it possible that our ancestors had a level of technical skill, of sophistication, that we've just completely forgotten? Let's crack open our first case file and see what we find.
Okay, our first story kicks off way back in 1937, and it comes from the super remote mountains of Tibet. The account says an archaeological team, led by a man named Chi Pute, literally stumbled upon something that has become one of history's most fascinating and debated puzzles.
Buried right there in the cave floors, they supposedly found 716 of them. Not one, not 10, but 716 stone discs. And each one was clearly a man-made artifact. But it's the details of how they were made that really ramps up the mystery.
So picture this. Each disc was about 9 inches across, with a perfectly drilled 1-inch hole right in the middle. When they were analyzed, they were dated to be 12,000 years old. And get this, they were made of granite, but with super high levels of cobalt, which makes the stone incredibly hard to carve. To top it all off, a tiny spiral groove ran from the center to the edge, filled with these minuscule, unknown hieroglyphs.
And if that wasn't weird enough, the discs weren't the only thing they found. The cave walls themselves were supposedly decorated with a really complex map of the stars, and, buried nearby, a number of small skeletons that looked human, except for one pretty startling detail. Their skulls were abnormally large.
For 20 years, you had scholars just scratching their heads, trying to figure out the characters on these discs. The script was totally alien, unlike anything seen before. The story goes that the discs eventually ended up with a Professor Tum Nui, and he apparently spent 4 solid years trying to crack the code, using local tribal legends as a guide. Then, in 1962, his supposed translation was released, and the story it told was, well, it was absolutely stunning. It was a 12,000-year-old account of a spaceship that had crashed in those very mountains. The survivors, who called themselves the Dropa, couldn't fix their ships, so they had no choice but to try and survive on Earth.
Now here's where things get really interesting. This wild story got a little more believable when someone compared it to a 1938 survey of 2 tribes living in the area. The similarities were just uncanny. Their reported height, their unusually large heads, and a few other traits seemed to perfectly match the description of the skeletons and the story on the stones.
The Dropa stones were eventually put on display in a Chinese museum, but then the story takes another twist. When a researcher went to go study them in 1994, they were just gone. Some say they were destroyed. So now, all that's left is this incredible and totally unproven story.
All right, let's move on to our second case, which takes us even deeper into the past. Way deeper. In 1996, near a place called Mount Baigon in China, archaeologists found something that just completely breaks conventional history. A whole network of iron pipes, part of a structure some researchers think was a power plant, dated to an unbelievable 150,000 years ago. Let's just put that date into perspective for a second. The Iron Age, right? That's when humanity first got good at working with iron on a large scale. That didn't even start until around 1200 BCE. These pipes are supposedly older than that by over 148,000 years. It just doesn't compute.
The scene itself was just baffling. Inside this pyramid-shaped mountain, researchers found a man-made cave full of iron pipes, all different sizes. These things ran deep into the mountain and seemed to connect to a saltwater lake nearby, where, you guessed it, they found even more pipes, both in and out of the water.
This discovery was so strange, so out of place, that it led to a really extraordinary theory. Researchers started asking, what if this isn't just a jumble of pipes? What if this was a highly sophisticated working system? A system designed to generate power?
Okay, so the key to this whole wild theory lies in the materials. An analysis of the pipes found that they contain silicon dioxide. You probably know what is quartz. Now, quartz has this amazing property. When you squeeze it, when you put it under mechanical pressure, it creates an electric charge. This is a real scientific thing. It's called the piezoelectric effect.
The second piece of this ancient high-tech puzzle is a process called electrolysis. Basically, it's when you run an electric current through water to split it into its core components, hydrogen and oxygen. And it just so happens that salt water, like the water in Lake Toso, is a fantastic conductor, which makes the whole process way more efficient.
So here's how this crazy system might have actually worked as a power plant. Step 1. Water gets pumped from the lake into the mountain. The sheer weight of that water, plus pressure from a chemical reaction with quicklime they also found in the pipes, puts a squeeze on the quartz. That pressure on the quartz then generates electricity. That electricity is then used to perform electrolysis on the salt water, splitting it into usable hydrogen fuel and pure oxygen. It's an unbelievably advanced, self-contained system.
So when you take a step back and you look at these two cases together, the Dropa stones and the Baigong pipes, a really fascinating, almost unbelievable picture starts to form. We've got these tales of impossible engineering, thousands of years apart, but they both seem to be pointing to the same conclusion. I mean, the amount of time we're talking about is just staggering. Look at this chart. The entire Iron Age, one of the biggest technological leaps for humanity, is just a tiny little sliver compared to how old these artifacts are claimed to be. Based on everything we think we know about history, these things shouldn't exist. They're chronological impossibilities.
It really makes you consider that maybe history isn't this nice, neat, straight line of progress we've always been taught. Maybe, just maybe, advanced civilizations rose up and then fell, leaving behind just these faint whispers of their technology, tools and techniques that were lost for thousands of years, that we're only just now starting to reinvent.
And it all leaves us with one last, really compelling question. If a potential power plant and a story of space travel could be lost to time for millennia, what other incredible achievements are still out there, buried, just waiting for us to find them?